Welcome to BledTalk, the podcast where insightful conversations meet language learning. I'm your host, Samuel Bledsoe, and on this show, we dive deep into a variety of topics with fascinating guests from all walks of life. Whether you're an English learner looking to sharpen your language skills, or simply someone who enjoys thought-provoking discussions, BledTalk is something for you. From engaging interviews to solo episodes filled with knowledge and inspiration, join us as we explore the world one conversation at a time. Get ready for a journey of learning, curiosity, and meaningful dialogues. Welcome to BledTalk. Welcome everybody to this episode of BledTalk. I'm here with Amanda, and she has her own page on Instagram, which is Aussie English with Amanda, and she's also on YouTube and on all the social media platforms. And I'll have all of her information in the comments and in the notes of the episode. But she is an English teacher from Australia, and she's been doing this for more than 3 years. And she has a lot of great content on all of these platforms, and she really helps people understand English and, a little bit about Australian culture as well, because today we see a lot about the US and maybe the UK, but a lot of people forget that Australia is a huge place with a lot of people, and a lot of people go there. So, Amanda, I wanted to, first of all, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for talking with me, and I hope that everybody enjoys this conversation as much as we are going to. And I'd like to ask you just to go ahead and tell us about yourself. Tell us about your story.
Sure. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. So, hello, everyone. Again, my name is Amanda. I am Australian born and raised, but I now live in India. So I moved to India in June 2019 to get married. Today is my anniversary. So I got married 4 years ago today. My husband's Indian, so that's the reason why I moved here. But I kind of fell into teaching, kind of by accident, actually. So I wasn't allowed to work for a certain period of time here in India because of visa restrictions. So once I got my permanent residency, it allowed me the opportunity to work. But I was a bit unsure of what I wanted to do. And so during the pandemic, I think I myself, like a lot of people, felt a bit isolated, really isolated actually. And I really missed that kind of connection with people. So I stumbled across a platform called Cambly, which is like a conversational English platform. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to apply and see what happens. And I applied. I didn't have any formal teaching experience. I applied, I got the job, and kind of just started from there. And I found that connection I was kind of lacking with people, the social interactions that I really missed during the pandemic. So after I got my permanent residency, I then looked at, a few other different teaching options. And I came across the platform I'm on now, which is Amazing Talker. And that gave me a lot more freedom in terms of setting my own rates and just having a bit more flexibility with being able to choose what I taught. I should rewind a little bit. During that time before I found Amazing Talker, I did my 120-hour teaching English as a foreign language certificate. So I got that, started working on Amazing Talker, and then I noticed that people started to book me because I'm Australian. They were either living in Australia, moving to Australia, wanted, practice speaking to an Australian native speaker, but then they wanted to know more about the accent and culture and, how to do small talk in Australia and, how to do this in a business perspective and how to communicate. And then I did some research and I realized that there was a pretty big gap in the ESL market for Australian English teachers. So then I was like, all right, I'm just going to roll with this. I'm going to start teaching myself more about the Australian accent, learn some, specifics about connected speech, and started learning. And now, it's been a number of years, and I have, my built group courses for Australian English, where I teach about the accent, culture, slang. I've just released a slang ebook, so that's available for purchase on the website, the link in my bio. So it's like an A to Z complete slang guide. again, because I found that when I was looking through Google, there were pages and pages of, top Australian slang words, but there was nothing that was really comprehensive. It was all like just random A to Z. And there was no consistency between those pages. So I was like, I'm going to just put it all together myself. So that's kind of a very, very quick, I think that was a bit quick, version of my story.
But it was good. I loved it. That's interesting because you have a story very similar to mine, but with a different country. The reason why I'm in Brazil, and most of the people listening, if they've been listening, they know why. But I was a missionary in Brazil first, and I came here and I went through a whole mission. But then that's how I learned how to speak Portuguese. That's how I learned a lot of things, and I did teach English at that time as well as part of a missionary duty, I guess. But after that, I went back, and then we had the pandemic. And so it was like 2019, 2020. And during 2020, then I met now she's my wife. And we thought that the best idea was to get married here in Brazil and then go back to the US. But so far we're still in Brazil, and so it's been almost 3 years since we got married, and I always tell people that's the main reason why I'm in Brazil. I mean, I love Brazil and I love the culture that's here, but I'm here mainly because of my wife. So I understand that part. I understand the story, and I also understand what am I going to do, right? I'm in a different country. I'm in a different culture. What can I do that's going to be beneficial? What's something I can do that I'm going to love? And
something meaningful.
Exactly. Something that you don't feel like, oh, I'm just doing this for money. No, you want to do something that you feel like you're making a change, feel like you're making a difference. And English
Definitely.
really I felt like that. Now, I would say the difference is like you said, you saw a really big gap in ESL teachers from Australia. And I agree with you. I hardly ever see teachers from Australia. And that's why it's always so difficult to find you, for example, to be on the podcast. But there's always plenty of ESL teachers from the United States. And so was really interesting trying to find out how to make myself different for everybody else. But I do have a question for you from what you said.
Sure.
How did you feel when you found out people were booking you because you're Australian? The reason why I asked that is, I'll give you kind of a background of that, is when people would do classes with me because I'm American, at first, I didn't really understand what that meant. To me, I was like, oh, so I'm not a good teacher. I don't teach well. It's just because I'm American. It's just because you want my accent. I kind of felt like, they were just going off of the outer layer, right? They were just looking at the cake. They weren't eating the cake and feeling all of the flavor.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt like that, and I don't feel like that anymore. But how did you feel whenever you found out that people were booking you specifically for you being Australian?
To be honest, I didn't really think too much about it. Because it was very, very early on in my career on Amazing Talker. So I was just grateful to be getting students, because it's really hard to grow on those kind of platforms like Correctly, iTalki, Amazing Talker, because there is like a huge influx of English teachers. Like, it's huge, the market on those platforms. So I was just kind of grateful to be getting students, because at that time I was balancing Cambly and Amazing Talker, because I wasn't ready to go all in on Amazing Talker because I still had bills to pay. Basically, I started on Cambly as more of a hobby. And then when I started on Amazing Talker, and I noticed that people were like booking me for being Australian, and then I kind of it grew into a passion. It grew into that, what you were just saying, that something that was meaningful and was providing value and that was helping people. Before it was like, oh, this is great. It's just a bit of a time pass for me, but then it turned into something different. So I didn't really think too much about, oh, they're booking me because I'm Australian. It's just that when they started, I did feel like a bit of a fraud when they booked me because I was Australian, but I wasn't able to answer questions about the Australian accent and those kind of specifics. So then I was like, oh, I really need to educate myself more on the specifics of this kind of, part of the language.
Right.
So that I don't look like an idiot, basically.
Well, and it's interesting because I always tell people when they do say, "Oh, I think you're a good teacher because you're a native," I say, "Well, remember that not all natives know how to explain why they say what they say, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that I don't know about English, and there's a lot of things that I didn't know that I know now because
Yes.
I teach. And a lot of times there's a lot of culture specific words that, all of a sudden now I'm learning that in the UK, they say it like this. And in Australia, they say it like this. You guys spell different words.
Yeah.
Just talking to you now, you said A to Z. And I was like, Z.
Oh, yeah.
Because for me, right? For me, Z, right? That's how we say it. Z.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, there's a lot of different little things. Or you said time pass, and for me it's past time. So it's
look, to be honest, I think this is an Indian English word though. I don't know if it's the same as you being in Brazil, but I have picked up a lot of Hinglish or Indian English, and I'm pretty sure time pass is one of them.
But it makes sense, obviously. But no, here in Brazil, I think sometimes when you're in a country for so long, you start to, I imagine is there any other languages that you speak in India as well?
I'm learning Hindi. Yeah, so I'm learning Hindi, and I was actually going to ask you that if it's the same thing with you with Portuguese, but I have found that learning Hindi at the same time I was teaching English has helped me understand English grammar more and Hindi grammar better. Like otherwise before I had no idea about grammar. What's the present perfect? No idea. And now I can look at present perfect and be like, oh, I know how to use that in Hindi now because I'm understanding both.
Right. Yeah. For a long time, you were just telling people that you just have to use have here because but then you find out. I remember when somebody had asked me about the present perfect way in the beginning. And I was like, what is present perfect or past perfect or present continuous? All these things. And so kind of answering that for Portuguese, I think that's what really makes me different for a lot of people is that since I speak Portuguese fluently, and I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I think I speak pretty well. It really does help with English as well. It's helped me understand so much of English, and also it really helps you look at the structure of the sentences. It helps you understand how people think, especially my students. Since I have my niche of Portuguese speakers, I know what they're thinking while they're talking. And so I can kind of say, okay, they said this because they wanted to say this. So let me help them actually know how to say it, right? And I tell them that. I'm like, a lot of times I translate what you say into Portuguese so that, and in my mind, right, I listen to them speak in English. I translate it into Portuguese and I say, would I say the same thing if I were to say it in English, right? If I was trying to say what they were saying in Portuguese in English, would I say what they said? And it sounds confusing. Yeah. Trust me, it works.
I get it.
And I think learning a second language helps you understand what they're going through too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sometimes an English teacher doesn't know. The ones that don't speak other languages, they don't know what it's like to go through that whole process. And so we sit here and we say, oh, study, do this, or go practice, or go out and talk to people. And harder than that. It's a lot more difficult than just saying to go and do it. And
Yeah.
would you say that by you learning Hindi, have you kind of, I guess, has it helped you at all with maybe patience with students, or kind of being like,
Yeah.
okay, I understand why they can't go out and just talk to somebody.
Yes, definitely. 100%. Also, it's given me patience when teaching, and also like I'm doing Hindi tutoring classes. Like I take classes twice a week. I was with a Hindi school previously that taught me all the basic grammar and stuff like that. I did a beginner's course. Um, and being able to teach and living abroad too, I feel like that gives me a lot more of a better understanding of how my students who are in Australia feel, because I know what it's like living in a new country, speaking the local language, having to work full time, make time to practice English and study and all of those things. So I try and give my students suggestions to improve their language in a really easy, convenient way for those who have a really busy lifestyle, because I know what it's like.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you, no, I guess the question would be have you, but what do you think culture plays a part in learning English? Like, how do you feel like culture plays part in learning maybe Australian English, or for you learning Hindi? Do you think that learning that culture with the language will help you improve and speak better?
I think so, yeah. And I think especially if you come from a country, I always get things too mixed up, hot and cold cultures. So I can't remember if Australia is a hot or a cold culture, but basically India is the opposite to Australia. It's generally Eastern and Western countries that are kind of opposite. They have very different communication styles, ways of expressing themselves, a lot of other things. I just focus on communication because my husband and I are from different cultures. So we have very, very different communication styles.
I understand.
Yeah. So I have noticed that a lot more by, I don't actually really have too many Indian students, to be honest. Most of my students are South American.
Wow, good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do have some Indian students, and it does help me to kind of relate to them by understanding Hindi. And a perfect example is in Hindi, there's three kind of different levels of ways of speaking. You have a very, very casual way of speaking that you really only say to your direct friend circle or your partner. Then you have like a casual, informal way of speaking, which is to people younger than you. Then you have the formal way of speaking that you speak out of respect to the elders or in a respectful way. So they don't really say please or thank you, but they reflect that in the way that they speak, whether it's the really respectful way. The verb ending changes in a respectful tone. So it has kind of helped me understand what it would be like for, as example, Indians in Australia. I used to work with a lot that didn't really say please or thank you. And I'd be like, wow, that's really rude. But now I understand that it's actually just a cultural thing, because they don't have please or thank you in there. Well, they do, but it's just used through the verb tense instead. So yeah, I think understanding the culture does play a really big part, especially in Australia. It's a very relaxed sort of culture generally, but then the communication style is very direct. So if you come from a country where it's not so direct, like India is very indirect communication. This is the conflict I had with my husband, because I would be very direct with something and say, oh, no, I don't want to do that kind of thing. And then he'd be like, why are you being so rude? And I'm like, I'm not being rude. I'm just being honest. I don't want to do that. Whereas they would sort of be like, oh, we'll see. I'll let you know. And it's not a direct no. And I feel like I have a lot of Asian students like from Southeast Asia too. And I feel like it's the same with those cultures. So by understanding those parts of the culture, I think it will really help you understand English a lot more as well.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Even though I don't know if I would say Brazil. I guess Brazil is has more of a Western culture than definitely than an Eastern culture. But
They also have a lot of differences, especially like communicating, for example. Um, Americans are sarcastic, but we're not as sarcastic as people from the UK. I remember talking to Dan and him telling me about the sarcasm level there, and I was like, yeah, we're not there yet. But um, in,
Yeah.
In Brazil, they're not sarcastic, and so
Okay.
and for us, I always tell people that a lot of American humor, especially like in Hollywood movies and things, it evolves around sarcasm. It evolves around people being
Mm,
sarcastic with each other. And for us, it's not
yeah.
really that rude. It's not that
Mm,
much of a bad thing. It's just something funny that we
yeah.
do between each, within our groups. And here in Brazil, it's not okay to be sarcastic. And there has been so many
Yeah. Okay.
that I was sarcastic because it's just part of how I grew up, part of my culture. And people called me ignorant. They called me all kinds of things because I was just trying to be funny, but it just came off wrong, right? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people when they go to a new country, a new culture, they have that experience. They have that, maybe I shouldn't say those kind of things. And also, especially when you get married to somebody from a different culture, I always tell people that getting married is already a pretty it's a great thing, but it has a lot of challenges. But when you get married to somebody who has a different culture than you, a different country, maybe even a different language, then it creates a lot of other challenges, a lot of other really beautiful things as well. But it creates a lot of
Yeah.
challenges because not only are you fighting your personal, well, not fighting, but trying to adjust your personal cultures, you also have
Yeah.
to look at him and say, maybe you say, okay, he didn't do that because he wants to offend me or whatever. Maybe he did that because that's how he grew up. Or I always tell people, like,
Yeah.
my wife and I, when we have kind of a discussion, we talk about how we grew up, and just I would tell her, I'd be like, that's, for me, that's not really something that we like, or vice versa. She'll tell me, she'll say, well, people here don't usually do that. And I'll say, oh, I didn't
Yeah.
know. And it really helps you kind of create that understanding. And I think that helps a lot when learning a language as well, because when you both have that, you have that understanding of, okay, this maybe not, it's not my culture. And so I don't know everything. It helps you
Yeah.
understand. Maybe somebody said it this way, not because they want to be mean, but because that's how it comes across. That's how they feel.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. And I think, yes, I do agree with that. By living in a different country, learning a different language, it does make you more, I think, patient, not just about teaching English, but being more understanding and accepting of maybe someone's personality by having an open mind that maybe that's just how it is where they're from. But then you can always explain, like just yesterday, 2 days ago, I was telling a student, I was sort of teaching her some small talk topics for Australia. And I said to her, like, it's actually kind of considered a bit rude to directly ask someone straight out, are you married? Are you in a relationship? Because it can be sort of taken the wrong way.
Yeah.
So there's a few things that, we should be a bit cautious about asking directly. So, someone's age, if they're married, that sort of thing. I'm so sorry, my dog's barking.
It's okay though.
Yeah, and so I think she's from China. And she was really shocked. She's like, oh my gosh, like that's just so normal to China. Like where you would just straight out ask someone, so are you married?
Yeah. No, here people they'll ask about your age, they'll ask if you're married and things. And in the US, you can ask somebody how old they are if the conversation is around that topic, if that makes sense. Like if
Yeah,
someone talks about something really old and they don't look old, then maybe you'll ask, well, how old are you? But it's not like
yeah,
I want to see if you're older than me or this or that. But normally we don't ask
yeah,
unless you're trying to buy liquor or something like that. And
yeah,
um,
yeah, true.
and then like being married, I completely understand that because I'd never thought about that. I was like, yeah, you're not right. I mean, you're not wrong. It's interesting how how sometimes people see that, like, are you married, as like well, I'm interested in you, so, and they kind of understand, they see it as a different thing. It's just like in some places here, just talking to somebody, they may think that you have other motives for talking to them.
Oh, same here in
So you,
India.
you kind
Yeah.
of have to be careful with, and and it's not everywhere. In some places, you can be open, and it's almost considered rude for you not to say hi to somebody. But in others,
Yeah.
well, like, why are they talking to me? And so it's interesting
Yeah.
to kind of learn those things. I remember I was walking with my wife one time, and I said, I told someone, hi, good morning. And she's like, why are you talking to them? And I was like, I don't know. It's just how I learned. That's how I learned how to talk to people here.
Yes.
And so it's
Yeah.
interesting. But yeah,
Yeah.
and another question I have for you is, do you miss Australia at all? Do you kind of miss the culture and the things that you grew up with, or are you pretty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I miss the beach because where I live in India, I'm closer to the mountains and I'm really far away from the beach. And I'm definitely like a beach baby at heart. So it is something that I miss a lot, especially in summer because it's so hot here in summer. So I do miss the beach. I obviously miss my family and friends, parts of the food, I guess. But where I live in India, I live in one of the capital cities. So I live in a city called Chandigarh, which is the capital city of the state of Punjab. So it's not a huge city. Our population is like 1 million people. So same as Brisbane, where I used to live. And I can get everything here. Like I got coffee just home delivered. Like, I can get anything, pretty much everything here. Sometimes services are a bit better. I go to the hairdresser or the salon. I get my nails done, hair done. I go to the shopping mall to meet friends. I go out for coffee. All of those things that I kind of took for granted in Australia because they came so easily to me, I really cherish here because I have them so readily available. I do miss Australian humour sometimes though, but that is fixed by this one YouTube channel that I watch called Yeah Mad TV. Oh, to anyone watching, if you want to know more about Australian humour, Yeah Mad TV. It is great. It is so funny. And I could just sit there for hours watching it. Basically, it's just like a group of people. It's usually 1 versus 1. And they're trying to tell dad jokes to each other. So really, really cheesy jokes, or sometimes they're a bit really inappropriate. And if the other person laughs, if you laugh, you have to take a shot of a vodka. So my husband and I, he really loves watching that. So we watch that, but sometimes he doesn't get the humor. So I have to explain to him, this is what it means. So I have found this account has only been around for like 6 months and it's got like 1 million subscribers already. It's just blown up. So since finding that, I found that it is a lot better. I've been back to Australia twice in the last year. I hadn't gone back for 3.5 years because of the pandemic. So my first time back was in December last year, so about a year ago. And it was really hard. I don't know if you had this same experience when you went back to the States for the first time, but I kind of felt like I didn't belong in either country. I felt like I was too Indian for Australia and too Australian for India, and I didn't belong in either place. And everything had changed in Australia in 3.5 years. Everything was just different. And it was really hard for me. So that period of time was it was pretty shit. Like I was homesick, but I didn't know for which home. And I didn't know what kind of feelings I had. And then I went back in September for my brother's wedding. So I wasn't planning on having a trip 9 months later, but my brother got engaged and booked his wedding. This time was so much better. And I had such a great experience there. And I feel like I was able to see and do all of the things that I missed. And I came back to India with such a fresh mind. And I don't know, I think since I found like Aussie English with Amanda, like my Instagram, I just started in April. So since I've started focusing more on this Aussie English side and I found that, I feel like I found my purpose. And that has made a huge difference, finding my purpose, something meaningful, and growing that here in India. It's worked out really well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That is amazing. I agree with you. I remember when I went back to the US, I was, I guess, lucky enough to have that experience twice, where the first time I went back to the US after 2 years, um, I went back, and this was actually the 2 years that I was gone. I wasn't on like internet and stuff like that. I was doing stuff, and I had no idea that TikTok even started or existed during that time, because I left before TikTok and
Yeah.
I came back after TikTok had already blown up.
Wow.
And so I
Yeah.
came back and I was like, what is everybody doing? Just watching all these videos and scrolling, and my
Yeah.
friends would tell me, oh, it's this new thing called TikTok. And I tried to download it. I tried to enjoy it, and I just didn't.
Mhm.
I didn't get
Yeah.
on the wagon that everybody else was on. And so I just felt so,
Yeah. Neither did I actually.
yeah. Well, and something that is interesting that you were talking about is like, I feel like when we get back to our country, we subconsciously expected things to pause and wait for us.
Yes. Yes. Like
Then,
how rude that they didn't pause, right? That's
right.
exactly how I felt. Like,
You're like, why is everything so advanced? Why did I miss so much? And but I think when you go back the second time, it's like I
Mhm.
already knew these things were happening, because now
Yes.
after the first time you were back, you started to kind of pay a little bit more attention to what's happening, and because
Yeah.
we don't know, right? When you live somewhere, you get the news by default, but when you don't live in your own
Yeah.
country, you have to actively look for news and see things. And I found that like having Facebook and having a personal page for those things, and just kind of seeing people go through the motions, and maybe following a couple pages that kind of give you the news from where you're from, it helps me a
Mm.
lot. And I agree with you. The second time you
Yeah.
go back, the better it is. And also just
Yeah.
kind of, I think what's really fun to me, I don't know if you've had this yet, but when my family came and visited here in Brazil, that was just so exciting for me, because I
Yes.
finally was able to show them all of these things that I've been doing. I was able to
Yeah.
present a whole new culture to them and show them, this is
Mhm.
this is the stuff that I love. This is the stuff that I was complaining about. And, what do you think?
Yeah.
And then they bring new ideas, and I get to see them go through it for the first
Mhm.
time. And I'm like, huh,
Yeah.
that is just it's so cool. And so I
Yeah.
love that you brought that up, because it really is something that kind of, you kind of go like, where's home, right? Where do I go home? Because
Yes.
I'm not home here and I'm not home there. So
Mm.
what do I find? But then you
Yeah.
kind of realize that you create your own home. Home.
Yeah.
There's that saying that home is where the heart is, and really,
Yeah.
I truly believe that, because
Yeah.
when you have a place that you love and you make that place, then that usually turns into home.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I agree. And you know what? I think this is something that I didn't hear about this from anyone. Like even my students who lived abroad, we talked about going home for the first time. I have plenty of friends here in India, other foreigners married to Indians or that just live here. And I never really heard from anyone about how hard that first trip home would be and that feeling of confusion and not knowing where home was. And it wasn't until I was in Australia and I was reaching out to friends, like saying, hey, did this happen with you? They're like, yeah, it happened to me like every time or whatever. That I was like, wow, it's not something that I ever thought would happen. I was so excited to go home. But like you said, you kind of subconsciously do think that the whole world is going to pause, and it doesn't. And then when you realize that it doesn't, you think, oh my God, I have to process so much change right now. And it's just a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that you also said you felt the same way, because I feel like this aspect of moving abroad is not talked about enough. That first trip home.
Well, it's interesting that a lot of people, they don't. There's a lot of things that I have experienced, and I thought, is this just a me thing? But after talking to so many people that
Mm,
moved to just other countries, other places,
yeah.
they also have been through the same thing. And so I feel like,
Yeah.
even though there's pages and agencies and all kinds of things that support moving abroad, people kind of don't talk about all of the feelings, and maybe they're feelings that we're not supposed to really share with all the whole world. I don't know, but because sometimes you just have to find out things by yourself. But it's nice to kind of have that warning before it actually happens.
Yes.
And so real quick, I have a question for you. This is it's
Sure.
kind of off of this topic, but
That's okay.
a lot of people in Brazil and in the United States, they love a restaurant called Outback Steakhouse.
Outback Steakhouse.
Yeah. So do you know about Outback and or approve of it at all? Like, is that...
Look, I don't even, this might be really oblivious. It might sound a bit naive of me, but I don't even know if this is a thing in Australia. It wasn't until I started, people started saying to me, "Oh, I love Outback Steakhouse," Brazilian students that would say to me about this restaurant, or
you're like, what's Outback?
I think I had heard of it in the States. Yeah, so the Outback in Australia basically just means like the rural areas, the remote areas outside of the major city. Majority of Australia is classed as the Outback area, but steakhouse, that's a new one.
It's interesting because I did research before, because before I lived in Brazil, I never went to Outback. Always thought it was expensive, and I didn't really know anything about it, so I didn't really look into it. But then I looked it up, and I was like, it started in Florida, and I found out some other things that Outback actually, it became really popular because there was a movie. I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was a movie that was really popular, and the United States had a like super Australian fever, like fad. They loved everything.
It was probably Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yes. And because of that, there were some people who they just decided, let's create an Australian themed restaurant, and Outback just got huge. And they have some good food. And I looked in Australia, right? I went to Google Maps and I was like, do they have an Outback? And I think they have like one, but it's one of those things that I'm like, I feel like they probably don't like it, just because it's it's like an imitation.
There was sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. They have steakhouses, but they're not Outback Steakhouses. Like there was this one really, really popular one. I think maybe they shut down now. It was a chain called Hog's Breath Cafe, and it was basically a steakhouse. So there was that. Sizzlers was popular for a bit. Triple S, I think, was the steakhouse as well. So I had a few different sort of chains as well. But Outback Steakhouse itself, I don't think was really a thing. But just going on the topic of Crocodile Dundee, there is a video I show my students of after it kind of blew up in America, the Crocodile Dundee movie. Australia hired the main actor, Paul Hogan, to do their Tourism Australia TV commercial. And so that was like in the 80s. And he uses all of this wild slang. And at the very end, it's like, book now, or like come and visit. I'll throw another shrimp on the barbie for you. We don't even say shrimp, we say prawns. And we don't even really put prawns on the barbie. Well, some people do, but it's not like a common thing. Right. So Americans think that's like what we do. We cook prawns on the barbecue.
That's what we think about. When you think Australia, we think of the Outback. Like, I'm not even going to try and say it in an Australian accent, but like, that's how we think of it. We think of the Outback and shrimp on the barbie. And I'm like that's for us, that is just a very well-known phrase. But that's interesting.
Because of that TV commercial.
And I guess another question. So I had a student who went to Australia one time, and she took a picture of a place. I want to know, is it strange to you that Hungry Jack's in the rest of the world is Burger King? Or is it strange to you that Burger King is Hungry Jack's?
Yeah, so obviously I grew up with Hungry Jack's. So the reason why, I don't know if you know the history behind it, but when Burger King decided to expand to Australia, there was already a business registered by the name of Burger King. So they couldn't use the same name because it was already registered with the, government or whatever. So they had to think of another name. So that's why they brought out Hungry Jacks. So I've known Burger King as Hungry Jacks my whole life. I don't even remember what country I went to when I realized that I think it was New Zealand. I went to New Zealand when I was 19 and I'm like, Burger King. And I'm like, this is the Whopper. That's Hungry Jacks. And then I think I had to look it up and I realized that it's the same thing. Burger King's popular here in India, not beef though. So they have like lamb Whoppers and the chicken burgers and whatnot. So yeah, it's actually, I'm vegetarian now, but I used to get the lamb Whopper when I was craving beef. It was not too bad. But yeah, so I think when I went back to Australia, I was vegetarian when I went back. So I wasn't really into Hungry Jacks, but it was a bit weird for me to go back and then having to start calling it Hungry Jacks again.
Yeah. And other thing I really want to know, I'm very curious. Is it pronounced, is it Vegemite? Is that how you pronounce it? Or is it good, or is it like I see people who talk about how important it is in Australia, and then everybody who eats it, I just see their facial expression and I go, I want an honest opinion. Is it good, or
okay? It's an acquired taste. It's a bit like wine. The first time you try wine, it's terrible. And then after a bit of time, you get used to it. I think it's the same for Vegemite, although my husband tried it and he liked it. So as long as you keep an open mind, I made a reel about this actually. So people spread Vegemite thinking it's like chocolate, and that's where they go wrong. You just have to start off with a tiny bit of spread, lots of butter and Vegemite, great. But it's really salty. It gives a sort of soy sauce kind of taste. It's very salty. So by starting off with a really, really light spread, it's kind of nice. Like I was actually sick a few weeks ago, and I had thrown up because I was unwell, and I just craved Vegemite toast because of the salt. So I think if you keep an open mind, have just a little bit of Vegemite to try it out, and then you work your way up. Don't go putting it on like Nutella, because that's where people go wrong.
Awesome.
But I am a fan of it. I do love it. I love it with avocado and cheese. I'll make, we call it a toasted cheese sandwich. I guess you called it a grilled cheese.
Yeah.
Cheese, avocado, Vegemite. Great.
Interesting. I'll have to try it. I really do want to go to Australia one day. It's just since it's an island on the other side of the world, it's a little more expensive.
It's pretty far.
Yeah, but
yes, I can relate. Yeah,
but yeah, I would love to go there. And one last culture question as well. Do you guys love Steve Irwin as much as we did in the US? The crocodile hunter.
Yeah. Yeah, he's an Australian icon. He really is. Like, I don't know. I think his accent as well. It's the really broad Aussie accent. Speak with a lot of slang. So I usually play one of his recordings when I teach my students about the different types of Australian slang. He's great.
I love it. I love all the crazy stuff that he did.
He's like a national treasure.
All right. Okay. So when I was a kid, at least, that was one of our favorite things to watch was what he was going to do. He's like, I'm going to stick my hand right in this guy's mouth. And I'm like, this is insane, but I love it. This is fantastic.
Dan was saying this actually when I did the interview with Dan. He'd asked about the crocodile hunter. And he said the same thing. He grew up watching it. I didn't realize it traveled that far around the world. I was pretty young back then though, like when he was famous, but like when he was alive and, filming.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that his shows traveled to all the different corners of the world.
I actually remember his funeral. I was in a McDonald's. I don't know why I remember it, but I remember everything that happened. That I guess it was just really important to me. And so, that's cool. I mean, it's cool that he is super. I guess he was super famous in Australia, and because of that, he just blew up everywhere else. And so that's awesome. But we are getting close to the end of the episode. There's a lot of things to talk about, and hopefully
we can always do a part 2. I don't mind.
I was getting ready to say, hopefully you're willing to come back for
yeah, definitely. This is great.
Second episode. But just to kind of end things on a proper note, what are some things that you have noticed just in general teaching English, that you kind of really want everybody to know? What are some really good tips that can help them forward?
So if you're learning English for the purpose of traveling or moving to a different country and you haven't left yet, start listening to that country's content. So whether it's YouTube videos, TV shows, movies, start getting used to the different sorts of accents. Like I tell my students that are planning to move to Australia, put a pause on the American and British content just for the time being, start the Aussie content, because it'll give you not only an introduction to the accent and slang, but culture as well. If you can really start to understand connected speech and the way natives talk, it's going to, I guess, in a way, try and replicate what your life will be like. Because if you're watching American English and you're moving to Australia, it's very different. Like British English and Australian English are pretty similar in terms of not pronouncing the R sound. But yeah, I think just start listening to more content of the country you're moving to. Another tip as well, if you find that they talk too fast, slow the speed down. I don't think many people know that on Netflix, YouTube, Spotify, turn the playback speed down. If it's too fast, I think I've talked really fast today. I'm sorry. I get really excited and talk fast.
I think you talked perfectly fine, so don't worry about it.
You can, playback speed, put it down to like 0.75 or whatever it is. Make it that little bit slower. At least then you'll be able to understand the connected speech side of things, the different parts of the accent. I think that's definitely the main tip I could give. Like even my students who live in Australia, in my trial, I usually ask them all like the same question: what are you currently doing to improve your English? Not many people do anything besides maybe their work. And so I say, if their main goals are improving your listening skills and speaking, start listening. As I was saying before, I know what it's like having a really busy lifestyle. So try and incorporate your learning into your current activities. For me, as an example, I go to the gym every day and I do a warm down on the treadmill. And usually I watch like English Netflix. So what I do now is I watch Hindi Netflix. I'm already doing that activity. I'm just switching the content. So you can do the same thing. If you're already listening to a podcast, if you're already watching YouTube or Netflix on your commute to work, on your way home, start using that time that you would already be doing that activity and switch it over to English.
That is awesome. Those are wonderful, wonderful tips. And I think that they really apply it. I like that you talked about there at the end that, just kind of incorporate into your life. That's something that Dan even talked about one time, is that, studying for 10 minutes a day is a lot better than not studying at all and then studying for 8 hours on Saturday or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're totally right. It's learning the culture of where you're going to go is also a really big
yes.
Because like you said, American English is very different from Australian English, and I always tell people, like, we understand each other, we can talk, everything's fine, but if you're going there, it's going to be different. And I think kind of adding to that, I mean, I don't want to take away from your tip that you gave, but I think when you do learn that culture, realize that there will be people in that country that will speak differently than how you learned.
Yeah.
So,
true. Exactly. Yes.
Like you're gonna get to Australia, and I'm not positive because I've never been there, but I imagine that different places talk a little bit differently. And it's
and it's such a multicultural country too. So like, not only do you have Australian, like what's deemed Australian accent, but you'll have people from say India or China or from Brazil or from Europe, European countries that are living in Australia. So you have those accents of English too. So yeah, that's exactly right. So the way that you've learned, it's not always going to be the same, and trying to keep an open mind with those things.
Yeah. It's almost like teaching English. You kind of have to be open to understanding what's going to happen. I think a lot of times teachers, they get into that mindset of, oh, I speak English, so I know everything that happens, and it's not true. There's so much, and that's why I follow a lot of English teachers specifically because they have different things for me. You've talked about all the different things that and I've watched just in these recent weeks that I've been following you. I've really seen a lot of different videos, and I'm like, oh, those are really interesting tips, interesting things. I listen to the Australians. I like to hear Australians say the word no, because for me it has that it has like the R sound.
No.
Right. And so I don't know. I like to hear those different things because that helps me understand English as a world language, not just as American English. And so I really want to thank you for coming on to the podcast and sharing so many wonderful experiences and tips. And I know anybody who listens is going to really enjoy it. Even my mom and dad, when they listen at home, they're supportive, right? When they listen, they're gonna love it.
Yes, my mum will watch this too. She listened to the one with Dan, so I know that she'll have a listen too. So hi, Mum.
Right. But like I said, I really appreciate it. You were a wonderful guest, and like I said, I hope that there is a part 2. I hope that you come back on.
Yes, I'll be back, please. It was great.
For everybody else who's listening, thank you for listening. And if you have any questions for me, for Amanda, just comment on YouTube, or you can follow us on Instagram or any of the other social platforms. Send us a message, and if there's anything super big, we'll bring that to the next episode, and we'll discuss it. But once again, Amanda, thank you. Do you have anything that you want to say before we end?
No, I think it's been great. I love doing these sorts of things. Actually, no, there is one thing I want to say. I have 2 YouTube channels. I have a YouTube channel about my life in India, where I do similar sort of interviews as well, but I interview other foreigners living in India. So if anyone's interested in a listening kind of episode or series, that channel is called G'day Namaste. So it's G'day for Australian hello, and Namaste is the greeting in the hello here in India, mostly in Hindi. So yes, I will send you that link if you wanted to include that.
I'll have all those links in the description so that everybody can follow, can get to learn more. But thank you so much.
Sounds good.
Everybody else for listening. And have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time on BledTalk. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to BledTalk. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more content. We are on all of the popular podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and we're even on YouTube. Don't forget to send in your questions and your suggestions. Thank you once again, and have a great day.